Am I audible?
Hey Shankar, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. A very good morning to one and all. This is Pranali Wag. On behalf of Shahanankar Kachi Engineering College, I welcome you all on the third day of AICTE-ISTE sponsored online refresher program on developing secure IoT application. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker, Mr. Sankar Ghosh, who is going to talk about security primer for IoT. Sir is multidisciplinary expertise in the field of technology consulting. Sir holds many certifications like he holds a certification in leadership strategy and growth from Wharton University, certification in AI from University of Washington, certification in AWS Cloud Practitioner from Amazon, and also certification in SAP from London. He has held important assignments in both Indian technology organization as well as in multinational technology consulting organization over a span of 26 years. He is currently responsible for driving innovation in large deals to achieve industry lead in differentiation for clients across the globe. Sir has received prestigious Accenture Leadership Award during the year 2013, 2016 and 2018. Thank you, sir, for accepting our request. I am very sure this session will be very informative session for all of us. Now I request our speaker, please take over and start the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Not sure my video has come up.
Yes, it has come. Sir, it has come. Your video is also on.
Okay, so maybe I'm not able to see it properly on my screen, but that should not be a problem. Let me kind of get started, and then at some point of time, very soon after kind of my introduction, very briefly, I would kind of share my screen. Okay, so I think I need to kind of close. Just give me 1 sec. I think something is wrong with my screen here. Okay, so I think let me share my presentation and let me know if you're able to see it. Then I'll kind of get started.
Yes, sir, it's visible now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first of all, thanks to this particular forum organizers, and I think this is my pleasure to kind of come in front of you to walk you through this specific topic. I'm going to talk about security in IoT world, and I'll introduce the reference architecture as well, as part of my kind of overall presentation. But before that, few topics which I'm going to cover today as part of the session is like this. There will be an introduction wherein some basic things I would kind of introduce. All of you, I'm sure, would be privy to such things. If those things are kind of known, I'll not spend much time. I would then cover the security threat landscape. And then at some point of time, I'll get into the topic number, subtopic 3 and 4, which is going to introduce the smart product security context and smart product security reference architecture. Now, I have already been introduced, so I'll not take much time. So I have got couple of roles in Accenture today. I lead the industry and innovation function globally for Accenture technology within their solution architecture function. And I'm also responsible for pre-sales as part of technology solutions within Accenture technology for entire APAC. So those are my current roles. my LinkedIn profile, as well as the coordinates in terms of reaching out, the email. You can reach out to this email, if you have got any offline questions, and I'll be happy to kind of address those offline as well. Now, before I get into presentation, I just want to make sure that, okay, this is not a monologue. So time to time, I'll kind of bring it up, some topic which I want, your response. And feel free to ask questions throughout the session. I believe the chat window is available for all of you. So if there are questions, would someone kind of pick that up to kind of bring it to me so that I can actually address those questions then and there? As a result, during the pandemic time, when several things which are not working, we have seen few organizations, right? They have they have maintained or they have assumed leadership position within their particular industry. So there, pandemic, one thing which we have seen consistently during last 4 or 5 months is that it has significantly accelerated the cloud adoption. And when businesses are actually adopting cloud, they're they're kind of investing in terms of digitizing and digitalizing their organization. So essentially what happens that whether they are in a manufacturing segment, or the distribution, or their public sector, or they're in education business, and of course the consumer friendly business in terms of retail, or finance, or insurance, media, we have seen, I think, significant growth. And as per IDC, they are projecting 1.4 trillion overall spend in 2021 itself, only in kind of IoT. So there's a huge amount of investment which is kind of getting in. And what I was telling that, with cloud adoption, the things are actually increasing further. So that way, I think it is very clear that more and more providers, not only cloud service provider, but IoT device and network equipment provider, industrial equipment companies like General Electric, Siemens, they are adopting IoT, in a rapid manner. And of course, organizations like Accenture, IBM, we are also kind of building multiple applications and integrating to all three ecosystem, be it cloud ecosystem, be it the device and network equipment, OEM kind of space, be it industrial equipment space as well. So as a result, the smart products are going rapidly at a rate of 32% compounded average kind of growth rate. So essentially, one thing is also happening that it is no more IoT, it is IoT coupled with very advanced computing options, which means most of the organizations are now kind of using edge computing, like quantum computing, edge referencing, and that way I think their entire messaging platform not only becoming more and more secure, but they are able to do almost real-time transaction in a very secure manner, and that's how they are actually becoming very, very differentiated. And whether you talk about healthcare, many startups like fintechs, we have seen during last few years how they have outsmarted their contemporary finance players, which is we are seeing the same thing is happening in automotive and healthcare at this point of time. Now let me kind of get to the next slide. So I said that we just want to kind of make the session interactive. So on your screen, are you able to kind of see? Of course, probably you are able to see the barcode. So use your kind of any device, mobile or any device, to kind of scan this barcode. If you don't have handy, you can also go to www.menti.com and use the code what you see here, 495186. So can you do that? Let's kind of give little like 60 seconds to 90 seconds, up to 1.5 minutes to kind of gather the response, and then I'll kind of get you to screen to find the answer. So what are the question is, what are the different type of sensors you are already finding in use, significantly adopted in IoT world? That's the question. And I've given a sensor can be temperature sensor, and there can be many other sensors. So can you kind of put your questions out there on that particular website? So Pranali, the code is visible to you, right? Can you just try whether the barcode is working on your mobile?
Yes, I will try.
So meanwhile, let me go to that particular web.
Yes, sir. The code is accessible.
Yes, sir. It is also accessible.
Okay. So I presume that for all the participants it is accessible. So the participants, I urge you to kind of respond, and then we'll get to see the collective response. So this is kind of mutual ideation which I'm trying to do, just to kind of get out of that monologue rhythm. So I'll show you as the things are coming up, because some of you would be responding. So initial few response have come in. I think it will be more. So someone said humidity sensor. I do not know what is this PIR sensor, but let the answer coming. Let's give 30 seconds more. Okay, we see proximity sensor, position sensor, humidity, okay, oxygen level is good, heartbeat, yeah. Thermal scanner, vibration, touch sensor, leader, okay. Position sensor. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. It is visible. Yes, sir. It is visible, sir.
Okay, so I think we have got some great responses. So I'll move on, but I think there are many other kind of sensors which would be kind of possible. So there are sensors like acoustic. There are sensors like measuring weight. There are sensors in the oil field which are used to kind of measure the flood. Because normally in the oil rig, what happens that normally, especially the wells for natural gas, their propensity that sometimes the leakages are there in the pipes and pumps, so water kind of trips in. So essentially that kind of sensor is used to kind of ensure that okay, water is not clogging, because that will adversely impact the productivity of that particular well. And then of course there are other sensors like soil moisture, biometric sensors, altitude sensors, smoke sensors, humidity, so multiple other sensors which are being used. So right now which slide you are seeing, is it the same slide?
Yes, sir. This QR code slide.
Okay, so maybe it is a bit slow. So I've moved to the next slide already. So let me kind of continue. So apart from sensors in IoT world, you know that another important component would be actuator. So essentially IoT world is nothing but a cyber and physical ecosystem of interconnected sensors and actuators, which enable the intelligent decision making. So the sensor's job is to kind of measure, quantify the physical parameter and convert that to a digital kind of value, and an actuator picks up that digital value and transforms the same to a physical action, right, depending on the decision making logic. Now, so therefore actuators are very important element, especially when you want the IoT device to kind of take concrete actions in an automation manner, in autonomous manner. And then other part of is that sensors and actuators are all interconnected. So if the supplier is vendor is same, they're using this common technology, right? So essentially they're using with various IoT product from the same ecosystem, then your personal area network and LAN would be good enough. But if when you are actually using multiple IoT products from different vendors using different technology, you need an IoT bridge, and IoT bridge is the communication element that allow interoperability. So interoperation between different technologies and protocols. So it can be Z-Wave, Zigbee, and of course Wi-Fi, Bluetooth also are widely being used these days. Now, to be another important thing is that obviously you need a particular protocol, right, at the application layer to kind of connect and enable those sensors and actuators to kind of talk to each other. Sometimes a different object will talk to different object. And therefore, you have got a different kind of application layer protocols, right? MQTT, like message queuing telemetry transport protocol, is widely used. Is a publish subscribe protocol, mainly for machine-to-machine communications. And then XML is increasingly getting used for real-time communications, for which XMPP is the protocol. During last maybe few years, simple object access protocol has significantly increased. And these days we are seeing the REST APIs, which are mainly using JSON in the cloud world. Doesn't matter whether you are dealing with AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform. But I think, REST API, the representational state transfer APIs are kind of being widely used, for the communication protocol these days. Now, we talked about all those elements like, sensors, actuators, the various communications protocol to kind of interconnect them. Ultimately, the objective is to kind of make an intelligent decision, right? And so therefore, I think one of the purpose of IoT network is to take decision, or the sole purpose is to take decision based on certain measurement and conditions. And it might be motion sensor detecting a movement, and then light sensor detecting the illuminance level, and then turning on the light bulb. It might be as simple as that. And then recently we were doing a project for a company called Hess in North America, wherein in the COVID situation they were finding it very, very difficult to kind of maintain the equipment uptime, because a lot less people are actually working to maintain the social distancing and other norms. So therefore, how do we kind of use a platform centric IoT solution to connect to their various equipment, be it pumps, be it compressors, be it any other kind of equipment, so that some of those actions for which high degree of confidence level is there, it can be made in an autonomous manner. And even with less people, we have been able to kind of get their uptime significantly increased, so that their bottom line, the organization's profitability, is not getting adversely impacted. And there are many other kind of energy companies for whom we are doing the similar kind of work. So I was talking about anti-flooding sensors, a while back. So it actually uses it uses the decision making algorithm to close the main water valve the moment it senses there's a flooding, and there are other applications as well. Now, moving on to the whole purpose of the whole IoT mechanism to work is that it has to work in a seamless manner. But I think very often, right, we see that there are significant amount of issues. So essentially, this is a picture where you can see that okay, people are being invited, but someone is kind of entering a zone, and they see that okay, they have an always on-device transmitting, and then their conversations and what they're going to converse might significantly alter your decision making, and that's what it exactly happens in the IoT world. So unless you completely authenticate, like how in a world which is continuously transmitting results or signals, or set certain physical actions based on the measured values between multiple different processes, unless you ensure that who are authenticated to kind of give the command, very often that your IoT device can lead to a significant problem. So essentially, what are the common issues for IoT ecosystem? It has got a very large attack surface because the number of sensors might be too many. The Depending on whether you are using personal area network or LAN or kind of WAN, it is a significant connectivity threat which you need to have a secure. Each of the device which you are using needs to be secure. The way you are deploying, that deployment strategy needs to have the security embedded in the whole deployment approach and methodology. And there are multiple other kind of ways the insecure applications or the security threat can be embedded, and that can be done even while application programming. That might be due to the complex ecosystem, because application might be very secure, but the infra part of it over which the data is getting stored, either the server or the network over which the data is getting communicated, that might not be completely secure. So there are multiple, the attack surface is very large, right? So what kind of security risks are possible? One thing is very clearly that abuse, the nefarious activities in the form of malware, exploit kits, very targeted attacks, right? And DDoS is also a common phenomena, right, for IoT. Most of the known attacks happened, due to this particular DDoS phenomena. And very often, there are kind of modification of information itself based on which decisions are being taken, so that ultimately if that information is captured and modified, then obviously device is not going to kind of take the right decision or right action. Another thing is interception or hijacking, right? So eavesdropping is very kind of common in IoT world. And this is the it might be interception of the information, it might be interception in the network itself, it might be a particular communication session which can be hijacked, or it can be the leakage of the data, because that where you are securing the data, that itself is not secure, and that might result to obviously various outages, right? Because ultimately it is managing your operational system. But sometimes the outage itself fails to, when outage itself kind of create a huge security lapse. Outage can lead to a failure of devices, failure of system, loss of support services, multiple things can lead to a security lapses, because ultimately secured applications also would require a minimum kind of availability to function, and at times if those availability is compromised, then it will not work. So ultimately, it will lead to a damage of IT assets, damage of sensitive data might be compromised, information leakage, and sometimes you're dependent on third party because you are working with some software which might be embedded, and that embedded software might not have been patched in a timely manner, leading to the security issues. So there are software related malfunctions or failures. And of course, IoT world is also prone to natural and environmental disaster. Most importantly, the physical attacks is something which is very, very important. That we have got the right authentication, right access control in place wherever the devices are physically stored, which are actually integral part of the IoT. Now, attack scenarios might change from one to another, right? It might be attacking the network links between controllers and actuators. So essentially, that is hugely important because then your actuator is not able to kind of take the right action because controllers have been compromised, and it will lead to a different wrong or inaction. That might happen. It might lead to attack to sensors, right? Modifying the values read, and therefore, if the values have been compromised, it will lead to again distorted kind of action, altering the decision making algorithm completely. Of course, I talked about actuator. Their settings, normal settings can be actually compromised. The entire administration system of IoT can be attacked, and this is where I think we need to be very, very careful in terms of designing the security architecture. The communication protocol, which we talked about, those are also kind of vulnerable. So we need to ensure that we have got the right network security control in place. There are devices which are injecting commands into the system console, and again, those would be kind of using certain protocols that might be hijacked as well, that might be attacked. There is a stepping stone attack which is possible, wherein some of the hosts are actually kind of compromised, and those hosts are actually taken over by the attackers, and step by step they actually kind of execute that particular attack. Which is the stepping stone attack, because in that cases that the other connected system which are connected to the host would communicate to the host in a manner in which it is designed to, but in the host when gets compromised, then many things which it can intercept, and those kind of stepping stone attack is also very common in the IoT world. And distributed denial of services is very, very common. There are many instances where it has happened. It is still continuing to be the largest threat for any IoT kind of device. Therefore, this requires special careful consideration during the security architecture building. And then final two would be the power source manipulation, exploitation of the vulnerabilities in the way data is read, as well as the ransomware. Let me get into another question very quickly, but before that, I would like to ask, Pranali, is there any other question from anyone so far?
No, sir.
Okay. So let's get to this particular topic. What do you know about Mirai in IoT context? What does it come to your mind? Maybe single or few words you can define. So again, go to menti.com, use this particular code 4048933, or you can scan the barcode and start participating to this particular topic. So let's give again 1 to 1.5 minutes. Let's see what answers we are receiving. So I think people have started. Some people I see that they have logged in. I'm yet to get any response. Are you responding? So far, we have not received any response. Yeah, now some of the responses are coming up. So, okay, some responses. So let me share again just to show what we are receiving now. Hopefully, you are able to see my screen now.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so we can see some of those responses. Participants are kind of provided. Affected Netflix, CNN, etc. Created a huge outage. It's a DDoS attack. You are right. It's a distributed denial of services attack. Attack on IoT devices. Anything else? What more do you know about Mirai? Okay, a malware. Great response. Anything else? Maybe last 15 seconds if anything comes to your mind, especially the participants who have not responded as yet. Okay, I do not think anything is coming. So let me move back. Let me move back to the presentation and we'll briefly kind of discuss that particular topic again. Okay, so what is kind of Mirai, right? So you can see, so essentially it happened when DYN, which was acquired later by Oracle, which was a DNS service provider, right? They got attacked, right, by number of bots. So essentially, it was a malware that kind of infected close to, I think, 11,000 odd different devices within DYN network, and specifically it used to run on ARC processor, which is bit of stripped down version of Linux, and you know actually the way the those malware was created, it actually turned each of the kind of node where it sees that okay, default the device, the default username and password has not been changed, that combo has not been changed. Actually, it targeted that particular network and then turned them to remotely controlled bot, right? What we call zombies. And then it acquired significant speed. Normally this attack, when it happens, the way it is designed, it can be 1 to kind of 2 to 2.5 terabytes per second. Couple of years back, even AWS also got some attack which AWS sealed. Successfully they captured it. That speed was almost like 2.3 terabytes per second. But I think here it was less than 2 terabytes per second. It happened in 2016, if I recollect correctly. But I think, it actually brought down significant number of systems, whichever kind of that point of time were availing the DNS being provided by DAN, and then a large number of companies across eastern coast in North America as well as Europe got adversely impacted because I remember Amazon, Netflix, many organizations, they could not even some of the the hotels, some of the travel companies also, they were actually completely shut down almost for 20 to 24 hours till they could recover. So essentially that kind of attack has got a wide spread of adverse impact on IoT, and therefore I think while designing the IoT, we need to kind of keep that particular security reference architecture in mind. And with that note, I'm going to kind of introduce the context of designing a smart product. So smart products come with many security challenges. So essentially, what are those? First and foremost, that I think security often becomes an afterthought, because when organizations, they work on IoT, the first thing comes to mind is that what parameters need to be measured, how to be measured, what actions would be taken to take the right actions, what kind of actuators we need, what kind of communication protocol do we need, whether it is a real-time messaging system or something else. So those are kind of 90 to 95% of the time goes to the operational, the very purpose of the IoT. But then before just kind of going live, someone says, okay, security needs to be thought through, and then security related the functionalities, certain protocols, certain restrictions, those things come in. But often it becomes an afterthought, right? And that is a huge problem, because the security aspect needs to be thought through right from the inception, right? The core functionality is very important for IoT, but security is also kind of equally important, because the devastation might be very painful. So the first and foremost thing is digital identity, because by definition IoT world is autonomous, right? We want machine to take action based on certain result. So therefore, very often there is no human intervention to authenticate the identity of a device. And that becomes a huge issue. So how do we kind of address it? We'll kind of talk through. The communication protocol diversity also creating problem, because this lack of standard communication protocol in terms of the security. So many options are today coming up, but lack of standardization, and also with limited security awareness by device manufacturers who are actually kind of coming up with different product, but security always been an afterthought from them. So that is leading to a communication protocol diversity related risk from the security perspective. Software patching in terms of keeping devices up to date. I think all of us, we use smartphone. Every time we see that okay, notification coming in that okay, operating system needs to be updated. Same happens for our laptop and any other devices. So any smart product, depending on that operating system, there has to be the security patch, which should be automatically downloaded and pushed, so that it becomes a routine hygiene, the basic practice that okay, the patching should be done in regular intervals. It should not be kind of irregular, and it should not be kind of hugely human intensive process. It should be automated by and large. So that software patching is also a very important thing for IoT devices and associated operating system. Device cost restriction is industry challenge, because very often the IoT uses many sensors, and therefore, when organizations, when the OEMs, they come up with the sensors, they try to kind of keep the cost minimum, because the bill of material cost would kind of go down. They will have an additional kind of edge against their competition. But sometimes those cost restriction becomes a compromise. It becomes a compromise on the security, which should not be. So we should be very, very careful in terms of dealing with third party, dealing with any IoT market manufacturer, that that security is one of the key concerns which should not be compromised. And of course, the long life expectation and regulatory uncertainty also sometimes say makes the security redundant, because security will always call for continuous upgradation, be it upgradation of the network, be it upgradation of the associated protocol, at times the devices itself, the sensor itself. So therefore, so at times security gets compromised when we kind of want to continue with the old kind of system. And regulatory uncertainty is also another parameter. Now, of course, regulatory leads the conversation of privacy, data privacy, and in Europe, I think GDPR is there. So they have taken it very, very seriously. So broadly, since security, as part of the security, as part of the IoT rather, we need to handle enormous amount of data. At times we would be producing, we'd be controlling, we'd be processing. At times, we would be using data which are not owned by us. So therefore, we need to ensure certain principle that data subject rights related principle, like it should be forgotten. If user wants, user should be able to kind of get a confirmation that it is completely erased or deleted, so that suspension of the data use can be communicated to them. Always the consent is very important, that if you are using data which is not owned by us, profiling, analyzing data which is not owned by us requires also a consent, and also portability, right? What are the systems you are porting the data, that also requires a kind of mapping and consent whenever the consent process is administered. And as data controller and processor, we need to kind of ensure that privacy is part of the design. It is not an afterthought. We need to kind of limit data transfers, because it can be used or compromised for purpose for which data is not shared. So that might lead to data breaches, which can lead to a significant the legal consequences in terms of the penalties and other the business right restriction. So essentially, the way we would handle the data in terms of the encryption, masking, we need to be absolutely kind of be conscious about the responsibility of the data controller and processor, and we need to kind of subject all the data to the right consent mechanism, so that those are in place. Now, while this is very important, it leads to the three fundamental principles what we talk about CIA, right? The security fundamentals, we always talk about CIA triad. So essentially it is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So confidentiality is all about the ability to maintain the sensitive data fit for use, and it is used by the people who need to know, is processed and controlled by people who need to know, and as per the consent form. Similarly, integrity is our ability, the system's ability to preserve the authenticity of the services, configurations, the internet connected kind of systems data, so that any unauthorized access is kind of prohibited, which can alter the integrity of the whole system or the services. And availability is very, very important, because availability of the data, services, network, applications, the entire internet connected systems would be important. Otherwise, not only the business disruption, but some of the security kind of protocol itself might not work. And all these three CIA, if it is working hand in hand, it will lead to a safe kind of smart products. The way it would design, it has been designed, it will kind of work. So essentially, in order to kind of have a safety in operations, right, we need to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the IoT system. So now coming to the point that IoT is kind of a bridge between business, process domain, information technology, IT part of it, and the operational technology domain, which is OT part of it, IT and OT. So essentially, IT is all about driving that business process in a design manner. So information confidentiality is a huge focus within the business process, but in the operational technology world, the production system availability and the safety kind of takes the maximum focus. So essentially, there are a lot of difference between IT and OT in terms of the way these systems are to be designed, to be architected, and some of those things are kind of very kind of obvious, but those things are actually there on this slide. So business processes is mainly process driven by human interaction, whereas OT is largely automation, autonomous operations, less human involvement. Business process IT normally gets significant budget so that it goes through the continuous upgrade. So therefore, it is relatively short life cycle. But I think OT is expected to have a long design life because this is a capital investment. Most of the cases, like IT has got a capex and opex part as well, but OT, the capex part is significantly high. OPEX part, normally gets subsumed within IT in most of the organizations. And business process safety aspect is kind of very less number of few safety critical operations, but in operation technology, most of the processes we need to kind of put the safety at the heart and center consideration. So essentially, both IT and OT will require data integrity, and availability part of it is very, very important. Now, having said that, what are the weaknesses, right, for which it leads to some sort of security failure? So one is security awareness itself. I talked about it so far, that security should not be an afterthought. The communication itself, many organizations, they are actually spending good amount of money on applications, but less money on infrastructure, especially network security. That is very, very important to have a system approach, the enterprise security approach, rather than segregating the application and infrastructure separately. Very often that we continue to use out of date software, especially for the devices. It is largely the case, and few other kind of poor access control, lack of security hygiene, insufficient built-in security. Those are, especially when you are using the embedded systems, those are the critical component in terms of security breaches. Let me take a pause right now. Is there any question from anyone? Sorry, am I audible?
Yes, sir, it's visible now.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so there are kind of various security incidents, right, with smart products which we have we are already aware of. Some of those things I kind of reproduced here. We talked about Mirai, botnet, army, which followed a huge litigation because the amount of devastation it created was significant, and it was kind of distributed denial of services attack to the DNS service provider Diane. We talked about it, happened in October 2016. White hat researchers, they demonstrated that in less than a minute they can actually take over a particular car, and not only that, they can actually influence the brake and engine simply via the cellular connectivity. So it talks about, though we talk about connected car, many kind of car providers, manufacturers, they're coming up with connected car concept. But I think how important it is, for the consumer safety, that you ask for that particular OEM takes care of the right security, the design and architecture, right, while bringing those connected devices, because very often those connected devices kind of are provided by third-party OEM. So therefore, the car manufacturers need to have the right control in place, right, procurement control in place in terms of doing the qualitative analysis, doing the quality assurance when they kind of procure those kind of component before they launch. Medical devices are also very vulnerable, especially it was researched in US very recently that how the medical device which controls the dosage delivered to patient who are not able to kind of take those medicines orally, how that can kind of be kind of taken over remotely, and that can be kind of altered, the functionality of that particular medical device. And of course, it is very clear that DDoS attack has happened for central heating system. It happened in Middle East in recent past as well. So essentially, in Finland also it happened some time back, but I think building management system, I think, is becoming more and more popular. So it is also important that when we, for our own house, which we are responsible for safety and security, when we are actually going for such product, we need to ensure that the right kind of security protocols have been applied. Now, one thing I want to kind of emphasize, which very often so far we have been talking about the reference architecture, so which takes care of the the application security, system integrity part of it, network security. But I think physical security is enormously important for the IoT devices to work properly, because it can be through physical ports, it can be through unexpected physical or logical access to kind of port or hardware security. I think this is one of the question, or even the open alarm or the door or panel of the system. So essentially, we need to ensure that we have right people accessing, right access control and authentications are in place, and more importantly, a very frequent audit. It needs to be happening, and it needs to be published so that all those things can be properly maintained. So physical security is enormously important, and therefore I think most of the contracts, when from our company like Accenture, we do with client physical security for that particular contract related scope is very important as well. Okay, so let me introduce now the reference architecture gradually. So essentially, you need to visualize the three layers of the reference architecture. One is of course the bottommost layer, which is where the data is getting sampled, collected at the instrumentation level. So this is the industrial or consumer IoT, the bottommost part of the three layer. So there also we need to have a security consideration. This is kind of edge tier. Then the next aggregation layer is the cloud platform tier. So where you are storing the data, you are analyzing the data, you are actually orchestrating different processes. So security aspect needs to be there in the cloud platform tier as well. And then third and most important layer is the business tier, right, where the reporting is happening, where the business process is getting executed. And therefore, this is mainly the consumer or the public services and government and enterprises are the kind of recipient of this business tier. But I think this is the third and the topmost layer. Now, what does it mean? It means that the you can visualize that there are three kind of classification of the security treatment or security constraint. The bottommost mainly the embedded aspect of the IoT devices which are using embedded software, they normally are ultra constrained, which means that they have got least secure protocols and secure security architecture which are part of that particular design. So it might be in the form of tamper prevent or tamper proof or tamper detection ability, digital identities. Of course, I think this was a question from Dr. Anil. Cryptographic engine is part of the such embedded software, and then firmware attestation of time system randomly checks that okay, the memory of that particular moment, the firmware memory is actually completely aligned to the designed memory image. So this image attestation is also part of the kind of embedded system. But as I said, these are very minimal, and normally these devices are actually heavily dependent on the high end. High end is the other part. Ultra constraint is the minimum security requirement, which is of course for small devices is just 8-bit security. And this needs to be complemented with the next level of security, which is the edge constraint, and the maximum security, which is 64-bit security, which is the high end. Now, edge constraint, apart from those four things which I talked about, edge constraint also has got additional layers in terms of ability to log. So any kind of action, any kind of intervention, any kind of result. So any parameter in the system change is continuously getting logged. It is not human human intervention proof, and that logging is happening every time there is any change in the associated parameter. Secure storage is the other important aspect of the edge constraint. Whenever the boot, I talked about that, sometimes the system non-availability can lead to a security lapse. So therefore, I think every time a device is getting booted, that point of time it needs to call the way an operating system gets reinstantiated. The security also needs security feature also, and security protocols need to be checked. That is called secure booting features. That is part of the edge constraint. Normally it is not there in the device itself, the embedded device. Then secure execution of the environment, the kind of operating system within which various devices are working, to kind of ensure that it is continuously executing various commands which are completely secure. That is that execution at the environment level execution needs to happen. That is part of edge constraint. And then normally edge devices are subject to various programming time to time. So each time some application or system related or network related programming which happens, we need to ensure that okay, those are having a right security compliance. These days, earlier we used to kind of do code, and we used to kind of get to know an expert who would review the code and then approve. These days, most of the kind of DevOps tools are having inbuilt security compliance mechanisms, so that the coder who are actually coding, if he or she is not aware of certain security protocol, actually he would not be able to kind of place or store the code for further processing. Because it will actually flag up as a RAID, and then in some of the advanced DevOps also says that okay, in this line you need to implement this particular object, so that the security compliance comes into picture. And then again, I talked about the stepping stone attack. To prevent the stepping stone attack, we need to have this host NGFW in place. So essentially, edge constraint takes care of most of the computational power related embedded security aspect which are not covered within ultra constraint. And then Beyond that, when we have a security management layer and security monitoring layer on top of all those things, then the system is called high-end devices. And high-end devices actually do not suffer from resource constraint. High-end devices are actually seamlessly it is designed to communicate, to work with IoT gateway. So we are going to kind of talk about that in the next slides. But I remember that these are the three kind of security constraint, right from the minimum security feature from ultra constraint for embedded security right up to high-end devices, which can actually which is capable of working with multiple edge constraint and ultra constraint devices. Now, in edge tier, in edge tier, I think we talked about multiple different layers, right? So each one of these has each one of these has got some purpose. So let me actually talk about some of those things. I talked about the booting facility already. Logging facility I briefly mentioned. Firmware and device memory, which I was talking about, that at boot and runtime, firmware attestation function is very important, so that we ensure that firmware loaded at boot is a valid, because that point of time security attack might happen to kind of alter the booting. So firmware loaded at boot is a valid and signed image, and if that does not meet the signed image criteria, it stops booting then and there. So that firmware and device memory attestation is very important. I think tamper prevention and detection is kind of obvious. Let me kind of secure development tools I talked about briefly, and security management is actually they perform the security monitoring operations all the time, right? To ensure that okay, we have got the right security management which is working for edge devices as well as the embedded devices. Now, few things which are not so obvious, like I talked about host NGFW. This is nothing but the next generation firewall and intrusion detection system. So essentially what it does, that it provides a network based defensive capability, because I talked about that very often that network is a vulnerable point, and it has got a deep packet inspection capability. So it actually transmits packet by packet in randomly, to collect certain data point around the device endpoint functionality, and it reports, and any kind of non-compliance immediately stops that particular device with a proper kind of backup arrangement in terms of another device. It will actually keep up and running at that point of time, or it will kind of raise alarm that it might disrupt the business process, because it is actually sensing a potential security threat. So essentially that is very important for host base, and this has got the ability to stop the stepping stone attack. Then I think secure storage, secure execution environment, those are kind of obvious. Cryptographic engine is a great way, because encryption is in one form or another at the core of most security logical controls. I think these days most of the cryptographic engine is actually getting embedded with quantum computing, because I think with the quantum computing, the processing power has significantly increased, and therefore the ability to kind of drive encryption is a very data intensive process, which earlier was not possible. Now it is actually possible. So therefore security is getting additional positive kind of uplift with the quantum computing, and very soon I think in IoT you will find more and more edge devices, edge inferencing, edge computing would come with the cryptographic engine, which will make it more and more secure. And digital identity was one of the questions from Dr. Anil as well. So obviously, as I said, that unique identifier needs to be embedded in the device during the manufacturing process itself, and this should be securely stored to prevent any malicious attempt based on the identity spoofing. So essentially, what does it mean? That all those things will interact with certain software component, and largely, the software component functionalities are very secure machine-to-machine interactions, which is very essential for IoT to operate. If it is using REST API kind of thing, the API level security enables secure data sharing across applications and systems, because very often, it has to be shared between organizations, between clouds, between systems. So those API, normally it gets exposed from API through the REST API, and those API security is very, very important at the software layer. Very often we call secure FOTA, which is nothing but the firmware over the air. It ensures that firmware updates are securely delivered to all the devices across the system at the same time, so that there is no mismatch in terms of operational functionality when the security is getting taken care of through this secure firmware. Sandboxing is an excellent technique. Within the IoT, normally, we can separate between what we can or we cannot trust through sandboxing. Of course, signed application software ensures within a smart product comes smart product. This actually comes from the authenticated sources and will perform as expected. So signed application software is very, very important. Then what does it mean? How does it help? So in the cloud layer, the cloud platform layer, I mean, so far we talked about the bottommost layer, but the aggregated layer is cloud. So through cloud, I think many of the IoT is getting implemented at scale in multiple organizations. So obviously it has got 6 different elements within it. One is virtualization security, which is related to all your kind of host storage integrity, virtualized configuration management, platform monitoring aspect, any host machine and hypervisor kind of related security as part of the virtualization. So all these will form part of that. Second component is network and endpoint related, like device endpoint, all the operating system, which is a kind of connecting or which is driving various embedded devices. File integration point, that security is very, very important. There are various kind of protocols for IDS and IPS in terms of the way the network should communicate. And of course, operating system hardening part of it is very, very important, apart from the server and endpoint anti-malware functionality. So similarly, application level securities are there. Digital level identity. Digital identity is very, very important in terms of having the right directory services, the privileged access management compliance protocol, having the right identity intelligence. So it's no more important to have the right access management, but right identity intelligence is also very important. And that is leading to the data privacy and protection. So we talked about it in terms of data access audit, in terms of data loss prevention, in terms of data discovery and data classification, data encryption at rest itself, data masking, anonymization. So all these are important. And then if cyber defense happens, that how do we respond? How the operational monitoring will happen? How continuously we are actually gathering intelligence about the threat, the vulnerability management, the threat hunting. All these are part of cyber defense control, because we need to kind of test it time to time by self-imposing attack, so that if actual attack happens, we do have active defense in place, the right threat prevention in place. So essentially those are the kind of standard layers of cloud. So whether you use AWS or Azure or Google platform, or Alibaba, all these kind of cloud suppliers, hyperscalers, they have got right cloud access and security broker implemented. And then topmost layer is all about your business tier. Business tier is all about right user interface, right business layer integration. Right, users are the weakest cybersecurity link, because very often they are less aware, so they do not follow the right security protocol compliance. So we need to have the right security. Even after designing the right security, our reference architecture, we need to have the right awareness mechanism within the organization, And most importantly, if you're using third-party providers, they need to follow your organization's security, enterprise security, policies. So that kind of leads to introduction of the end-to-end operational model. So which means that ultimately it will be the business layer like employees or service providers, the customer, citizens, contractors, they will be using through a secure user interface. They might be communicating to directly the secure communications channel or the cloud platform if the cloud is the implementation vehicle, and then cloud can directly communicate to high-end devices through the secure communications layer. It can also kind of interact with some of the edge devices which are implemented with edge constraint. But if you need the cloud to communicate to ultra constant like embedded devices, you need to have a IoT gateway. So IoT gateway will establish because they do not have the right security protocols embedded within the device itself. So therefore you need to have the signed software practices. You need to have the encrypted communication, tokenized communications, which all can be embedded as part of the IoT gateway itself to make the communication secure. And finally, this is how a smart product security reference architecture would look like. So essentially, there has to be a security strategy. The security strategy will have, how it needs to be designed, keeping the regulatory compliance in mind, how the security and privacy should be part of your product design, how it should be part of your product roadmap. Then, safety and threat modeling should be in place while the IoT devices are being produced. And then, of course, post-production, it has to supported right security policies, processes, and procedures, and to have the right security culture, you need to have the right security training and awareness in place. But having said that, this is more of the strategy part of it. But below that, I think we talked about IoT devices. What are the important security component within high-end, the edge constraint, and the bottommost, the ultra constraint layer? Those would be connecting through either personal area network or home area network or LAN or WAN. There would be software. We briefly introduced the 5 different elements of the software from the security perspective. And then through that network and software, it will connect to the cloud platform. Within cloud platform, again, we have got 6 layers of security, which we talked about briefly. And through this mechanism only, it will get exposed to the business users or the employees or the endpoint kind of interface system. And if that happens, then the whole reference architecture will kind of work perfectly. So that is the overall reference architecture which I wanted to introduce. And I kind of talked about various component, bit by bit, at the device level, at the network level, at the software level, at the cloud level, and then at the business, at the end consumption level as well. So I'll stop here. If there are further questions, let me kind of address right now.
Thank you very much, sir, for your informative and enlightening session on the security for IoT. So there are questions we have from the participant side. So the first question, I will read it for you, sir. The first question from JP Patil, sir. Is it necessary to providing each device with a unique identifier?
I think I answered that question. Each device unique identifier is kind of necessary because very often I think as far as those are able to communicate with their kind of specific IP, we are good, but that is not good enough from the security consideration. So I talked about it. If you have noticed that when we talk about the IoT device, the digital identity is the bottommost element of the security layer, right? So therefore, I would say it is, yes, from the security perspective, it is very, very essential. Okay.
And sir, one more is, can you please throw some light on firmware hijacking?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question again?
Can you please throw some light on firmware hijacking?
Okay, so I think excellent question. So the firmware hijacking, if you have noticed, I kind of talked about the FOTA, that particular thing, right? Why that overall kind of FOTA is required as part of the firmware. It's part of the software kind of security. The firmware over the year kind of update is essentially required because what happens that you know, every time you kind of design a particular software, it follows certain communication protocol related compliance. Now, every time, whether it is a network compliance or operating system compliance or server related compliance or storage related compliance, all those compliances are continuously kind of changed because those policies are changed because you know each of these service provider or the software supplier, they keep on kind of analyzing, keep on experimenting, keep on researching in terms of the additional security threat, and then to once they kind of do that experimentation, they realize that these are the vulnerable thing and then update the policy. Those policies need to be implemented at various level. So therefore, I think, you know, if we do not do that, then what happens that, okay, you might have very robust devices, but you know, your the way your orchestration happens across various elements, which I talked about it in the reference architecture, if you recall, that, you know, at the network level, at the software level, you know, despite having the right device security protection, if the firmware is not latest, what will happen that, you know, if certain firmware image is not updated, it might at the time of booting or it at the time of runtime, it might face a particular security attack, and at that point of time the image will be altered, and by virtue of that, since the latest security image is not in place, you will not be able to kind of map to the or match to the security image, and system will find that okay, everything is all right, and then you know stepping stone kind of attack which should be very possible because system would be incapable of kind of detecting that host is already changed, but you know the change form, the revised image is not in store, so that what it is matching to the old image, which will kind of work properly, perfectly, leading the system to believe that this revised host is you know perfectly kind of working, and it will continue to communicate, leading to the exposure of the data or related kind of functions within the IoT. So therefore, firmware is very important, without which you know the security, specifically the stepping stone kind of attack would be inevitable.
There is one more question from Nilima Dongre madam. The question is, does identity management alone can be sufficient to avoid DDoS attack?
No, it is not, because beyond access management, identity access management, you need the right kind of threat intelligence in place. Because what happens that, you know, identity access management usually depends on multiple way to ensure that user is authenticated. And all those ways are not always foolproof. These are also having dependencies on the particular user kind of complying with the security norms. So therefore, I think you need to have the right intelligence, identity intelligence system in place to ensure that, okay, where the identity access management is vulnerable, either because of inaction or limited action from the user to comply with the security policy, or you know it is you know some way or other way that you know a device related identity threat is there. So therefore, identity access management itself is not enough. It needs to have the threat intelligence and identity intelligence embedded and integrated with it. Okay, any other question?
Okay. So now there is no sir, now there is no questions. Once again, thank you so much, sir, for your informative session.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to all the organizers. Thanks to Smita, Pranali, yourself, Chetan, and this institute. I appreciate you are coming forward and organizing a very relevant topic at this point of time. And thanks to all the participants for kind of listening, for your time for during last 90 minutes. Sorry.
Sir, yeah, sir. Sir, please accept this virtual memento from IT Department of Sankar Kutchi Engineering College.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Hello.
you so much.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Thank you. I'll dial out now.
Yeah, sir. Now I request all the participants to fill their feedback from attendance link, which is shared in the Q&A section. And also the next session will start at 1:45. So please join that session on time. So thank you everyone for attending this session. We will see you at 1:45.